The ability to master our emotions is like the best cheat code you can have in life. Emotions affect us more than we realize or give credit for. Emotions guide us. They are the reason why we make a lot of our decisions. And they play a factor in how we perceive things. Since emotions guide us and are the leaders of our decisions, the more you master your emotions, the less likely you are to make irrational, hurtful decisions for yourself, and outside circumstances are less likely to control you. When you master negative temporary emotions are less likely to cause you to make long-term detrimental decisions. And I talk more in depth about emotions in my 11 weeks of Break Free from the Past course, and I definitely recommend you would check it out, especially if you have some blocks in your life or you're really struggling with some things and you can't get past it. So the first thing to understand about emotions is most people think emotions are created based on what happens to them. So they believe outside circumstances make them feel this emotion. I can't control my emotions because this certain thing is happening to me. And this makes people feel helpless and powerless and feel that their emotions control them. So they go around filled with anger or sadness or anxiety, and they get triggered and then they react off of these emotions, where it then can place them in bad positions where they deal with negative consequences, like they lose people in their life or they lose opportunities. When we feel outside circumstances control our emotions, or our emotions are created by outside situations, we may do things like immediately react off of our anger or our sadness and destroy situations and relationships. And then once that emotion has passed, we then regret it because we no longer feel that emotion, but we feel in that moment, oh, this thing happened to me and I feel this emotion and I can't control myself. And a little side note, what's funny about the English language is when we say we're an emotion, we say, I am this, I am angry, I am sad. So then it becomes a part of your identity. You feel that you are this emotion. In a language like Spanish, there is soy, which is I am permanent, and estoy, which is I am temporary. So something permanent would be like a character trait. Soy perezoso, I am lazy. Or estoy cansado, I am tired. In this moment, I am tired. So they speak about emotions knowing they are temporary and something that come and go, where in the English language, we talk about them as our emotions are us and they're permanent. So subconsciously, when we say I am angry, we think we are this angry person. Or a sad, when you say I'm sad, you are a sad person. And it's much harder to work through an emotion when you feel it is a part of your identity. You are that thing. So that's why it's so important to be careful of the way you talk about your emotions as well. You know, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that. So you know in this moment you are feeling it, but it's not something you are. So let's now talk about how emotions are formed. So first, a situation happens where we form a thought about the situation, or a thought arises about something. You then identify with that thought, and then a physiological sensation arises from that thought, which we then identify as an emotion, which once we feel that emotion, we then emotionally react to that emotion. For example, something happens at your job and then your boss gives you constructive criticism. And a thought you may have is, oh my God, I'm so bad at my job. Now my boss thinks I'm incompetent. Now a sensation of anxiety or a feeling of you feeling low about yourself comes up. And then later when you're alone, you start to ruminate and think and obsess about the situation. And then you may try to think and figure out a way where you can win your boss over. And then you may go to the more extreme and text them apologizing for your wrongdoings and that you'll do better in the future. If you look at it neutrally or objective or from an outside perspective, your boss never said those things. They never said you were bad at your job. They just said, hey, you did this wrong, can you do this better in the future? You perceived your boss as saying such things, which then caused a sensation in your body and an emotion, which then caused a reaction. And now your boss, when they get that text, they're like, what the hell? Like, where's this coming from? And then you unintentionally embarrassed yourself from this built up story. You revealed your cards that you're maybe insecure, or you're overly apologetic, or you have a hard time taking criticism and you're anxious. See, when you react off of your immediate emotions without thinking them through, it can lead to those types of consequences. And you unintentionally embarrass yourself with the story that you built up. So, our emotions are not created based on the outside circumstances. Really, our emotions are created based on what we think and how we perceive situations. The more we identify with a thought like, I'm not good enough, no one likes me, this person's ignoring me, the more we will repeat those types of patterns in our mind. And then the more it will grow stronger in your mind. And so you'll gear more towards those negative thoughts and those negative reactions. And that's not just with negative thoughts, that can also be with positive thoughts as well. That's why, when people manifest things, they're identifying with a thought and they're building upon it and they're creating, the things that they want. And they're creating that perception and that reality. So it's not the environment that's creating your emotions, it's how you see the environment that's creating your emotions. So basically, the formula of how emotions are formed is there is an interpretation. So you then interpret a certain thought or event in your mind based on your own story. You then have a physiological reaction, which is you have sensations that arise from your thoughts. And then once you have that sensation and you're having these thoughts, you then have a continuation of the story and you entertain that story. So you feed into these stories and you repeat it in your mind. Then you have that strong emotion and which results in a reaction. You now identify the emotion that you feel towards this situation, and it can become a continuous emotion you feel the more you identify with these thoughts. And you have the same reactions every time a similar situation or thought comes up. So now that we understand emotions and how they're formed, let's talk about how do you master your emotions. So the first thing to do is to observe, acknowledge, and identify the emotion you're feeling. Identify the sensations you feel and label them. I always talk about this. Get comfortable with what anger in your body feels like, what sadness, what embarrassment, what anxiety. You'll feel it in different parts of your body. Identify and then get comfortable with it so it's easier for you to distinguish, oh, I'm feeling this emotion. Because when you recognize what emotion you feel, it's easier to let it run its course, it's easier to detach, it's easier to know how you want to deal with that emotion. It's so important you don't ever push it away or you try to suppress it. You want to acknowledge it immediately. It doesn't mean that you are going to emotionally react off of it, because a lot of people are like, okay, I don't want to deal with this right now because I don't want to react off of it. You are in control of your reactions 100% unless you have a mental disorder like bipolar, or you have borderline or something like that where you really struggle with it. But other than that, and even so then you learn the proper tools to how to deal with it, but you can absolutely control your emotions. So it's important to acknowledge it and validate it. And it also, like we talked about, be careful of the language you use. Say, I am feeling this way, rather than you are this. When you put a label to the emotion, I am feeling anger, this is sadness, whatever it is, you are less likely to identify it as, at your core, and like it's you're able to be like, oh, I am experiencing this in this moment. And then it is much easier to process and work through. A lot of studies have shown when you're able to identify an emotion, it is so much easier to be able to disassociate, so it's not a part of you. And the more aware you are, the more likely you are able to deal with your emotion. The next is to figure out the root cause and why you are feeling that way. What triggered this emotion? Were you having negative thoughts? Did you see something that upset you? What happened? Then you want to identify the story that you are identifying with and that you are playing over and over in your mind. You want to observe it from an outside perspective. How true is it what you're saying right now? Are you being overly critical and harsh? What words or things are you repeating in your mind that is building negativity or causing you to build more and more resentment or anger or whatever the emotion you're feeling? Because when you think about it, you first have a thought, I'm going nowhere in life. And then it goes to, I'm worthless. Then it goes to, I'm just going to be stuck here forever. And then it goes to, I should just give up on life. It eventually spirals to the worst of the worst. So being aware of that story and the things that you're repeating to yourself, so it can help you pause and challenge it and be like, okay, well, what am I saying? How much of is it true? And you can recognize the negative things you're saying that are causing you to feel all of these emotions. Same thing with anxiety. We build up these stories in our head. The things we have anxiety about aren't even happening in real time. We're imagining it. And as I always say, your brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So when you're imagining these anxieties happening, you then feel like they're actually happening in real time, and so then you're reacting as if they're happening. So be aware of all of these stories and things that you're telling yourself, and be like, these are just thoughts. Thoughts are not reality. Thoughts are not facts. Think about the facts of the situation. Next, decide if you want this emotion to take over. So always validate and acknowledge that you're having a feeling, but decide, okay, how do I want to react or respond to this emotion that I'm feeling? So let's decide that you feel angry, you feel mistreated. Make the decision of, okay, how do I want to handle this emotion? Do I want to let it go and release it in my own way, journaling, letting it out by punching a bag, whatever it is, or do I want to release it by having a healthy confrontation? And what's so important is that you never confront situations or make decisions out of anger. Ever never make a decision out of anger, because then that's when it leads to those detrimental consequences. So think things through before, let anger subside to some degree where you're not at an extreme amount of anger before you make any type of decision. And before you decide that you want to do something, think it over for at least 24 hours. And if you're still feeling that same way, then do something about it. Obviously, there's situations where you're in the moment where something happens and you want to confront it 100%. In those moments, you want to take a deep breath when you're angry, so that way you go from that emotional, reactive part of your brain to more of that logical and reasoning part of your brain. Take a deep breath so you're not at an extreme high amount of that emotion, and then to think about, okay, how do I want to react to the situation? Maybe you want to say, hey, I didn't really like when you said that to me, or please don't touch me, or whatever it is. So no matter what, before you react off of an emotion, think of the consequences of if you were to react off of that emotion, or what is the cost of you reacting that specific way? What are you willing to endure? And if you are okay with the consequences, then by all means, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and, express that emotion as you see need be fit. But always remember that you can change what emotion you're feeling based on a change of a thought or a change of perspective. It is not just environment based. And the last thing is sleep and eat well. When you don't sleep and you don't eat well, this can have a huge effect on your emotions, because our basic needs need to be met first. Hunger, thirst, sleep. Those are all basic needs. And when those aren't met, it's a lot harder to deal with negativity and our emotions. Humans are driven to be negative because it helps us survive. And so when you are sleep deprived or when you're hungry, you're going to be more in those negative emotions because you're not going to be able to control them as much because your basic guideline needs are not being met. So mastering your emotions helps you so you are no longer a victim to your circumstances, but you are the creator of your circumstances. And these are some ways where you can master those emotions, is by really being able to be aware of these emotions and these sensations, being very in tune with them, taking deep breaths when you feel these emotions, changing the story and how you perceive situations, so you can absolutely perceive things in completely different ways. That's why so many people react to situations so differently, because we all perceive it so differently. And that's what's crazy about reality and our perception, is we can change our reality based on how we see things. And then before you react to anything, think about the consequences. Are you okay with this consequence if you react this specific way? So what do you guys think? Leave it all in the comments below. And please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with someone that you think may need it. Until next time, thanks for watching. Bye guys. I literally feel like a clown today. You have those days where you just feel ugly and just like, it's just not, it's a not it day, whatever that means. I have 73 tabs open. What am I doing with 73 tabs? You then have a physiological, I heard myself. What is happening out there? I think they're carrying a dead body down the stairs. See this, guys? This is very like Western, and that is not me. I'm a city girl.